So you're using Wix and you want to create an input that auto-completes based on items that you have in a CMS collection. Welcome back to the Wix Wiz. I'm Aton, and today we're going to be doing just that. We're going to be building an input just like this one, where you can use it to search for quotes from the show The Office that are stored inside of a CMS collection. So for example, if I type in the word people, then it will kind of autocomplete here a suggestion for one of the quotes. It'll also highlight the matching term. It'll match if we have several terms, even if they are not all in the same place consecutively inside of the quote. And finally, if we go ahead and click enter, it will take the suggestion and put it into the input. So if you want to learn how to do all that and more, let's get started. Today is going to be a really fun tutorial. In terms of setup, I'm here inside of a blank template inside of Wix Studio. And the only thing that I've done so far is I've gone over to the CMS and I've uploaded this mock data set of office quotes. So it compromises of a quote and the speaker, the character who said the quote, season, and episode. We're mostly going to be focusing on this quote part initially. And our goal is going to be to create an input which auto completes or auto fills a quote from the collection of quotes based on what the user is typing in. Before we get started, I'm just going to say that even though we are in Wix Studio, everything that we're doing here should be possible also inside of Wix Classic, albeit things might be in slightly different places or look slightly different, but in terms of functionality and capabilities, you should be able to do everything that we're doing here today. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and add in an input, which is going to serve as the input for our search and our autocomplete, essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and just add in this plain input right over here. I'm going to make it kind of nice and big and prominent because this is really the highlight of our tutorial today. And in terms of settings, it's already set to type of text, which is good. So I'm just going to change the field title over here. And I'm just going to say search for quote. And in terms of the placeholder text right over here, I'm just going to change this to say type or start typing here. Okay. Awesome. So this is pretty much all we need to get started with this input. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is that as people are typing into this input, we're going to want to query our collection and see if there are any quotes that match what that person is typing. Even if they haven't completed searching for the quote yet, just based on the few words that they put in, let's see if we can find anything that matches that quote. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to turn on code mode or dev mode. If you're in Wix Classic, it'll be kind of up here on the upper left. Here inside of Wix Studio, it's on the side. And we just need to go ahead and click this button right here to start coding. Now that the IDE is open, we're ready to start programming. And the first thing that I always like to do is to go ahead and grab that element that we're going to be programming and to give it a unique ID. So this is going to be our search input. And that'll make it really easy for us to find it in our code. Now that we've given it an ID, we're ready to start the search. In order to facilitate the search of the collection, we're going to need to use an API. In the past, we might have used a Velo API. Today, I want to use an API from the SDK. If you're not so sure about what the difference is between those two things, you can go ahead and search my channel. I have a whole video about the announcement of the JavaScript SDK and highlighting some of the differences with Velo. And I think it's about time that on the channel we start to experiment at least with the SDKs and demonstrate how to use them. So this is the SDK documentation, and we're going to be using here this query. And in order to do that, so first thing we're going to need to do is get this import. So I'm just going to copy this import line right over here, head back into our editor, and put that right up here on top. You can see here that it shows that we don't have that package installed yet. And what we can do is just go ahead right over here and click install it now. And that should install it behind the scenes. While it's doing that, we are ready to start writing our code. So what we're going to want to do is I want to find quotes inside of the collection as the user is typing in the input. There we go. We can see here that the package was installed, by the way. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tap into the search input element. So we're going to go ahead and select that using $W. So let's do search input. And we're going to tap into the on input. So basically, whenever somebody types a key into the input field, a function will run. And this function is going to go ahead and search our collection and try and find quotes that match what they input so far. So let's go ahead and implement that query. In order to do that, I'm going to need to make this function async. And we're going to say here, const quotes query result equals to await. And here we're going to say items dot query. Okay, you'll notice, for those of you who are familiar with the Velo syntax, you'll notice here already slight differences. So instead of using Wix data dot query, we're using items dot query, so it's a little different. But it's not that different. It's pretty similar. And here we're going to want to say the collection that we're going to be querying. So let's go ahead and make sure that we get that collection ID. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go to databases. And here we can go ahead and copy the collection ID. And I'm just going to put that right over here inside of the query. Now, if we just run it as is, that'll just give us a query with the first 50 items in the collection, but that's not exactly what we want. We want to specify that we want items that match what we've already put into the input. So in order to do that, we can do a few things. Either we can go over here and we can say const search query equals to, and then we can select our search input and tap into the value. That's one option. We could have also technically used here the event itself that occurs and then find the event.target.value. You could really go either way. I think that this is usually a little easier for people without much of a coding background to understand. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. And once we're running our query, what we're going to basically want to do is we're going to want to say contains, and then we're going to want to specify a field. And the field we're going to specify is going to be our quotes field. So if we just open here this drop down, then this is the quote field where our actual quotes are stored. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And I'm going to put that also over here. And we're going to find if the quote field contains our search query. And then we're going to run here dot find, which will go ahead and run our query. And then what we're going to get back is our quotes query result. And I'm going to add here a console log, console.log, and I'm going to say here result, and I'm going to kind of log the result that we get back from the query. That's just for debugging and explanation purposes later on. Now that we got back our quotes query result, which will essentially be a list of items from our collection, we need to decide how we're going to display these items as autocomplete items for the user. So what I'll do initially is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put some text right over here under our search bar. Okay, so I'm going to put some text over here, and I'm going to change this to just say here autocomplete text, just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and make it like a little gray, so it looks a little different than the main input. So let's go over here, and I'm going to change this color on the side. I'm just going to make it kind of like a gray, maybe even lighter gray, just to kind of indicate that it's kind of secondary importance to what's inside the actual search box. I hope it's not too hard for you to see. Let me just make it a slightly darker gray because I'm starting to feel bad. There we go. Just pretend it's gray. And what we're going to want to do is that once somebody starts typing, we're going to want to display one of the quotes that matches what they're typing here. Okay, so we're just going to choose the first quote from the list, and put it right over here. So let's go ahead and first of all, I'm going to make sure that this is hidden by default because we don't want people to see it until they start typing. So I'm just going to go ahead and click here, hidden. And I'm also going to change this to say autocomplete text, autocomplete text, just like that. So as soon as somebody is typing and we get some results back from the quotes query result, what we're going to do is I'm going to get the first quote that comes back. So let's say const first quote equals to quotes query result dot items 0. Okay, so the query results will have items and that will be an array. And we're just going to take the first item inside of the array. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that the autocomplete text dot text should be equal to the first quote. Okay, just like that. And here you can see that it's being highlighted as red. And that's because I made a small mistake here. And that's this first quote is going to be an object. That object is going to include also the quote itself, but also the other information like the speaker and the episode and stuff like that. So we want to drill down here and just specifically get the quote from the first quote. Okay, like that. And once we've assigned it to the autocomplete text, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we show that text to the user. So autocomplete text dot show. Now, the last thing that I want to allow the user to do is to accept that autocomplete selection. So if they see that the autocomplete is the quote that they want, I'm going to allow them to press tab. And when they press tab, that will essentially assign the autocomplete to the input that we have over there. So what we're going to do here is we're going to on input has something called the key. So let's read a little bit more here about on input, because that'll really help us understand what I want to do here next. So I'm going to open up the documentation for on input, which can't be found, which is a little unfortunate. Another place that we can look for the documentation is if we select here this input field, and then we can go over here and just click on this text input element. And here we have all about the text input element. And hopefully here we can find the on input. So right over here. So on input. And here, the on input, let's see here, the event handler, the event that occurs. So here, I wonder if we have the key press. I might have gotten confused between two events. So here we have key press. And here, let's see here. So function parameters, that's the event. And let's see over here. So a text input receives a key press. And then here we want the event.key. Okay, so this is what I actually wanted. So this will allow us to identify when the user is pressing a specific key. And then once they hit tab, let's say, so we'll allow them to accept, or you can do it as enter or whichever key you want. So let's go ahead and set this up over here as a separate event listener. So I'm going to go over here under our original event listener. So this is one event listener. And then here I'm going to set up another one. So let's go ahead and select our search input. And I'm going to say here on key press. And here we're going to have an event. And here we're going to want to get the key. So we're going to say here const pressed key equals to event dot key. And what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to log the key that was pressed. I'm not going to set up the entire functionality yet. So we'll just say here key and pressed key. And the reason I'm doing this is because I actually don't know what the key is going to be when somebody presses, let's say, tab or something like enter. I could probably look it up online, but since it's not a simple, character, it's not A, B, C, so it's a little hard to know what this actual value will be in advance. It could be tab, it could be tab in caps, it's hard to know. So for now, we're just going to run a test and see what that value is, and then we can program the rest of it later on. So I think we're ready to do an initial test. So let's go over here and head into preview mode. And let's just wait for it to load up. There we go. So we're all ready, and you can see here that our autocomplete text is hidden. And we have a developer console here as well, which we can take a look at as we're typing. So let's start typing quotes. Actually, I'm not sure which quotes. It's not every single quote, obviously, from the office. It's just about 1,000 quotes in the collection. So let's just start typing I. So here we get the first quote that comes up. All right, Jim, your quarterlies look good. How are things at the library? I actually don't remember that quote. Let's try T. Okay, so now it has with the word T. And let's try E. And now it's item. Yeah, so now I think it's stuck because I'm probably the query came back with no results, and that's why it's kind of stuck on this last one over here. Let's take a look at the queries that have actually been coming back here inside of the developer panel. If I can manage to open it up. There we go. So here we can see here that we've gotten, so here, when we were initially running with, like, let's say just the key I, with when we typed, let's say I, and then we had IT. So these are the ones that came back, all these items. So we got here 50 items for IT, and then for ITE, we got back 29 items, and then when we added M, we got back 0. Okay, so there were no quotes with item, and when there were nothing came back, it just kind of left us with the last autocomplete. So that's already kind of like a little bug that we'll want to fix up. And let's go ahead and I'm going to hit the tab key, just like that. And let's see what it logs over here inside of our developer console. So let's go down over here. Okay, so you can see it says tab with a capital T. And I think enter would be the same thing. So let's just hit enter, let's say. And then we can go over here. For some reason, the developer console is very hard to open and close, possibly because I'm kind of zoomed in a little bit. So this is enter. And I'm kind of leaning towards the enter option because when I click tab, it also kind of implemented, navigation on the page using tab. So probably better just to use enter. So let's go ahead and add that new feature and that bug fix that we wanted to add in. Here we are back inside of our code panel. And the first thing I'll do is fix the bug. So what we want to do here is that if there are no items that come back with our query result, then we want to hide our autocomplete text, just to indicate that there are no items with. We could also change it to, let's say nothing found or something like that. That's really up to you. It's really a very individual choice. So let's go ahead and I'm going to add some logic over here. And I'm going to say that if quote query result dot items dot length is smaller than 1, so we didn't get back any items essentially, then what we're going to do is we're going to hide our autocomplete text dot hide. And then we can add here an else statement and put the rest of our logic inside of that else statement. So essentially this will only run here if we actually get back results from our query. So that should deal with that little bug that we identified. The second thing I want to do here is to implement our logic for the pressed key. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say that if pressed key equals to enter, then what we're going to do is we're going to assign the value of our autocomplete text to the input. So I'm going to say here that search input dot value equals to autocomplete text dot value. And there are other ways that you can handle this. Dot text. And there are other ways that you can do this using like global variables and stuff like that. Like with almost anything you'll program, there's more than one way to do it, but this is one way to do it. So that's that. And let's go ahead and try and preview this again and see if we've fixed our bug and we've added in the new feature that we want. So here we go. So let's start typing again. So ITE, and then I'm going to hit M. And now it's not showing me any autocomplete because we don't have anything that matches that. And let's go ahead and try, let's say, people. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And you can see here that it took our autocomplete and it put it here into the input. So that's a very, very basic autocomplete here. And there are definitely a few more features that we can try and add in to make this kind of spice it up a little bit. So let's go ahead and talk about those new cool features that we can add in to try and make this a little more user-friendly. The next feature that I want to add in is one that will help users identify why their suggestion is coming up. Essentially, what parts of their text that they're inputting into the input actually match the suggestion. And we're going to do that by highlighting the parts of the suggestion or the autocomplete that match the text that they've input so far. And in order to facilitate this, I actually had a brief conversation with ChatGPT where I explained the requirements of the function that I wanted to build. And I'm going to paste it right over here on the bottom and explain it. So here we have a function called highlight substrings. And what it's going to do is it's going to take an array of keywords and text. So the keywords are going to be things that the user inputs, and the text is going to be the suggestion or the autocomplete. And then what it does is it identifies where there's a match between the keywords and parts of the autocomplete string. And at the end, it is going to return HTML where the matches are bold. Okay, that's kind of really in a nutshell. And you can choose to use the code that I have here. You can kind of just ChatGPT your own function. And what we're going to do is that instead of just assigning the quote over here directly to the text, we're actually going to run it through our function first. So here, I'm going to go and call our function. So substring highlight substrings. And we're first going to need to pass in an array with the keywords, or here it's going to be our search query. So I'm going to pass in an array here, and I'm just going to pass in the search query. And if you only have one search query, then technically we didn't really need an array here, but I'm just kind of thinking forward at kind of future features that we might want to add here and how to make the code more scalable if we wanted to add those features in. So that's why I chose to put it as an array here. And then here we're going to pass in our actual first quote dot quote. So I'm going to pass that right over here. And this is going to return HTML. So in order to make this work correctly, we're going to need to change this dot text here to dot HTML to tell the text element that it's actually going to be getting HTML now. So let's go ahead and test this out and see how this works. So I'm going to go over here to preview mode. And as soon as this starts up, let's try it out. So I'm going to try again with, let's say, people. Okay, so we still needed to do some fixing up here in terms of the in terms of the styling over here because we kind of lost our grayness, and I also don't really see it 100% working. Let's see over here. So let's try JIM. Yeah, this doesn't seem to be working so well, which is often the case when you're creating something with ChatGPT. So let me try and open up here and see if we have any bugs or anything over here. I don't see anything off the bat. So let's go ahead and add in a few more console logs that will help us identify what our function here is actually returning. So let's go ahead here, and I'm going to say right over here. So we'll say here const autocomplete text, and then I'm going to move this right up here. And I'm going to add a console log. So console.log autocomplete text, and put the autocomplete text right over here. And I'm also going to get rid of some of the other logs that we had in previously because we don't really need them anymore. And I don't want them to go ahead and clutter our developer tools. So now that we've got that all in place, let's go ahead and try this again in preview mode. And as soon as this loads up, I'm going to start typing. So let's start with people. Okay, so let's see what's going on over here. So when we typed P, so I see that it's adding the bold around the P as I would expect it to. And here it's around the PE. Let's try PEO. And here I see that it didn't really do it correctly. So I'm thinking here, because people is part of the is capitalized. So that might be a reason that it's not working. Let me try with some other search phrases. So let's try here. Let's say I. Okay, that worked. IT, that worked. ITE, that also worked. So you can see that it's kind of bold here. I know it's a little small. We'll fix that up. So that seems to be working. So I'm guessing here that it's probably has to do with capitalization. That's also why Jim didn't work, because names are typically capitalized. So I'm going to head over to ChatGPT and just tweak up that function a little bit so that it works, and also add in a bit more styling, and then come right back and we'll check out the results. Here we are with our updated function. So this function is programmed to be case insensitive. So it doesn't matter if the keywords are bold or are capitalized or not. Same for the autocomplete text. And also we just added some kind of general styling to go around the HTML just to make it a little bigger and gray. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like in preview mode now. So I'm going to go ahead and start typing. So let's try again. Let's try with Jim, because Jim is something that didn't work last time. And there we go. So now we see that Jim does work, even though here I'm using lowercase and here Jim is uppercase. And let's try again with people again. There we go. So now this is working quite nicely. Obviously, we could still do some tweaking with the styling and whatnot, but it's all pretty simple because it's just CSS. And I think that this feature really adds in a lot in terms of helping the user understand why they're getting this auto suggestion. One slight flaw that we still have with our auto suggestion is that it doesn't really work very well unless the person types out the quote in the correct order. So if somebody was to type here, let's say people say I, then that would all work. But let's say if somebody just types, let's say people God, because they don't remember the exact quote, they just remember it has the word people, they remember it has the word God, then it won't really help identify the quote that we want to help them find. So let's see how we can tweak our search algorithm to help them find quotes, even if they don't type the words or in the exact correct order, or they might miss out words inside of the quote that they're typing. In order to allow inaccurate or inexact search, let's call it, I can think of two possible approaches. There are very likely more that are not getting into like the whole world of semantic search and stuff like that. One, both of them will depend on splitting up part of this action into an array of keywords or words instead of using strings. And there are two, so we can come at it from two directions. One is when we're setting up our collection itself, we can go ahead and we can add in a field, which is essentially an array of all the words that we have. So instead of having the quote only like this, we can have another field which has an array of all the words in the quote. And then we can we can try to match parts of that array to the string that the user typed out, and thus identify a specific quote. So that's one direction that we can go. And we can also go the reverse direction, which is the way I want to approach it, where essentially what we're going to do is we're going to break down the user's search term or terms into an array. And we're going to use that array and run essentially a search that can match any of the words in that array. So let's go ahead here, or that matches all the words in the array. Well, we could do any, we could do all. It really depends how strict you want to be. But let's see here how we can adjust our code to facilitate that. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is that instead of having just our search query here, we're going to want to have all of our search terms. So let's say go here and say search terms. And this is going to be search query dot split, and we'll just split wherever we have a space. Okay, this can also have some inaccuracies, but this is the best rough draft of what we want to do. Next, once we have that array of search terms, what we want to do is we want to make our query a little more versatile. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to say here const quotes query, and this is going to be equal to our initial query, like this. And once we have that, we're going to string on additional filters to the query, like dot contains, with all of our search terms. So here I'm going to add in a loop, essentially. So we're going to say here search terms dot for each, and we're going to say here for each term. What we're going to do is we're going to say that we're going to need to change this from a const to a let. Okay, that's because this is going to be a variable whose value changes. So we're going to have here quotes query equals to quotes query dot contain dot and. Okay, so and is the more restrictive option here. When we do and, it means that all of the queries have to be matched. I'll try and explain a little more later on. Once we implement it, it might be a little more clear. So we're going to add in here an and we're going to say here that we're going to have another query. So it's going to be items dot query, and we're going to have here office quotes dot contains, and we're going to have here our initial term. So here we're just going to have contains, and we're going to have the quote field, and we're going to have our term, just like that. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to say that this is our starting point. So we have a query which essentially has no filters on it. It would return all items. And then we go through each term in the search terms. And then we have here another query which specifies that it needs to contain, the quote needs to contain that term. And we're stringing that on using an and connector, which essentially means that our query needs to match all of those filters. I hope that clarified a little bit and didn't overcomplicate things. I'm going to try and add here. Let's add over here a few queries, a few console logs. So we'll have here console.log search terms, just like that. And we'll have the search terms. And then here, I'll do here for each term. So we'll do here console.log term, just so we can see how the logic kind of plays out as it does. And then we're going to have our quotes query result, which will equal to await quotes query dot find. Okay, so we're just going to run our query at the end. And then hopefully what we'll get back is all of the quotes that contains all of the words that the person typed in, but not necessarily in that order. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if this works out. I'm going to add in one more console log here, and we'll look here at the quotes query result dot items. So let's just say that this is the result, just like that. Okay, so I think that we're ready to run some tests. So let's go back over here into preview mode. And let's start typing. So let's go over here and we'll write here, let's say, people. And now let's write the word, let's say, God. Okay, so now, even though people and God are not one right after the other, then it's still showing us this quote. If I change it to, let's say, gods, then that will disappear because it doesn't have, the quote doesn't have the word gods in it, it just has the word God. And if I go ahead and erase this, and let's say I use something else, so let's say pretty, like that. You can see that our highlighting feature is not working anymore, but that's going to be a quick fix in a moment. But I think that our search results are working. If we take a look here at the, let's take a look here all the way on the bottom. So let's take a look at our results. So here we have two results here. So people say I'm the best boss, something, something pretty. Okay. And then the other quote that we have here is, wow, it's a long, it's a long one. But I'm going to assume that it has people and pretty. Yeah, if you can find it, then 10 points to you. Yeah, but that's the idea behind this this search functionality, that it'll essentially find all the quotes that have all the words that we typed in, even if they're not in the correct order or whatever. So that's one more feature, and let's just kind of touch this up a little bit. So I'm just going to go here and edit the site, and I'm going to fix it up so that instead of sending here our search query here in an array, I'm going to send in all of our search terms. And this is kind of why I built the function in this way to begin with, because I knew that we were going to implement this feature, which would be based on search terms versus just one query. And now if we go here into preview mode, and hopefully we can go ahead and see this in action. So let's try here people, and now let's try pretty. So now you can see here that it's highlighting both people and pretty. Okay, and let's try to add in here Meredith. Oh no, I don't know. I don't know how to spell Meredith apparently. Let's try and add in another word here from the last one. So let's say kinda. Okay, something like that. So let's go over here, and I'm going to add people, pretty, and kinda. And then you can see here that it changes the quote to that last quote that matches all three of those terms, which are spread out throughout the entire quote. So all somebody needs to remember is just like a few words from the quote. And yeah, that's pretty much all that they need. So I think we're going to wrap up here for today because I don't want to tire you out too much. There are definitely some more features that I can think of that we can add in here. For example, some kind of spell correct, like if somebody spells people wrong, we'd still be able to find their quote. Also, the option to display a few different options for autocomplete or something like that. So let me know in the comments if you're interested in seeing that, and if what other features you would hope to see in this kind of autocomplete, and maybe we can do a follow-up tutorial just to kind of really enhance this a little bit more. But otherwise, we're going to wrap up here for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss out on videos like this every week. And I'll see you next time. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. This tutorial may be over, but that doesn't mean that your journey has to end here. YouTube will have some recommendations up above in a moment for more videos, but don't get too distracted because my eyes are over here, and on the WixWiz website we have a lot more resources for you to continue learning or get support for your business or project. We've got a blog, beginner courses, and a community forum where you can vent about Velo or post some tough questions like, why does my header have a mind of its own? On the website, you can also find my personal calendar to schedule a one-on-one and details about getting ongoing assistance from our team of Wix experts. I'll catch you later, and don't forget that every big feature was once a small bug.